Hey everyone, Elena here. Welcome to another episode of Shift with Elena. In this conversation, I'm joined by Zach Costello. Zach is an entrepreneur. He's a family man. We talked a lot about finding purpose. We talked about the importance of perseverance and grit when it comes to achieving success. We also talked about the importance of maintaining family values in today's society. And as a father of 5, he knows a little bit, a thing or two about it. So it's pretty impressive. We also discussed everything from overcoming societal challenges to seizing entrepreneurial opportunities in the modern world. Zach also talked about how he came to be an entrepreneur, his previous kind of involvement in sports growing up, and how the grit and mindset he developed in sports he now can bring into his business ventures. So if you're looking for a little bit of inspiration around a great story, some entrepreneurship tips, and really just how do you balance all of that as a family and all those societal pressures that we have today in the world, this episode is definitely for you. Check it out. As always, like, subscribe. It helps the reach. I appreciate your comments. I appreciate your suggestions, and see you next time. Zach, welcome to the Shift Podcast.
Thank you for having me.
I'm excited to chat. For my audience, let's just kick off with, tell me a little bit more about your career story. That's what I'm really interested in about. I'm always curious kind of what people studied and how did they end up doing what they're doing today, because you seem very fulfilled around the things that you're doing, and I want to understand how you got to that point.
Sure. So, I guess to make, a long story short, my grandfather started his own business. My father started his own business. So they're both what you would call small business entrepreneurs. There wasn't necessarily a question in my mind as to what I was going to do when I was done with college. Now, I wouldn't say that I went to college to study anything specifically. I ended up with a major in finance and business, with actually a minor in real estate, which will come into play here in a minute. But I got a scholarship to play Division I baseball in college, so that was really my focus. And when I think of my athletic career and all the playing that I did and all the coaching that I received from the time I was young all the way up through college, I learned a lot about life. I learned a lot about hard work. I learned a lot about what it takes to be successful on the playing field. So I'm an advocate, especially for young boys who may not conform or fit into the classroom setting, to play sports. That they were important to me. So if you have the ability, I definitely advocate for those things for those reasons. But anyway, so fast forward. So when I got done with, as I was wrapping up my college career, I knew that I wanted to start my own business. Now, I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. I just knew that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I knew that I didn't necessarily want to work for anybody else. I had an internship through college, actually at a government contractor here in the DC area. And I knew the whole time that I was like, look, this is good money during school. It's good experience. But I knew that I was eventually going to start my own business. That's what I wanted to do. And I was clear on that. I just wasn't clear on what exactly I was going to do. Now, as I was at school, there was there was a franchise, actually a restaurant franchise that was pretty well known around campus. I guess it's Jimmy John's. So Jimmy John's was, they were on college campuses at the time, and we saw how busy they were and how I guess what we assumed were successful businesses at the time. So getting into franchising was essentially what I did initially. So I kind of pitched the idea to my dad. He and I partnered up. We opened up a Jimmy John's location, our first Jimmy John's location here in the Northern Virginia area. It did pretty well. We opened up a second location. It broke even. Long story short, with franchising, they limited us to a certain area here in Northern Virginia, and we were not confident, especially after we opened our second store, and it only broke even, that we could open locations that would be super profitable. And the way that we opened up these stores, and I talk to people about this all the time who are interested in franchising. They gave us a franchise disclosure document that had all these financials in their marketing material that all looks really good. Now, those financials and that financial outlook did not apply necessarily to opening up a store in the DC market. the rents out
Mm-hmm.
in Champaign, Illinois, where Jimmy John's is headquartered, are not the same as rents here in the DC, Northern Virginia area. Also, we opened up our store with debt. So we're looking at pre-debt EBITDA and rent, and basically it was not a good comparable. The profit margins were not comparable. So again, long story short, we realized that we were not going to make the money needed, especially me who was operating the store and getting a salary, that I was not going to get the money that I needed to provide for my wife and kids who I had at the time, here in the Northern Virginia area by franchising Jimmy John's. So what we eventually did is, I mean, at that point, my brother had joined the business, and we eventually got him operating the stores. And my pivot was to start a real estate company under a holding company. So I would operate a real estate company. My brother would operate the Jimmy John's stores. Fast forward, COVID hit. We eventually got out of Jimmy John's completely. We sold those stores. My brother went off to start a career in something else. And I have since built a real estate and design build firm from scratch, from zero, from, my first cold call when I had, no sales and knew no one. Got a real estate license, started that from scratch, eventually got a remodeling Class A contractor's license in the state of Virginia. I got that experience through actually flipping houses and project management through those, working for somebody who had remodeling experience. And I've since built that firm from zero to, I mean, depending on the year, between $3 and $4 million in revenue, and it provides for my family. And then, and it's and it's meaningful work. I enjoy operating the small business every day. It fits who I am and my personality. I mean, I'm I'm an extrovert. I'm really big on aligning what you do with how you were made and your personality. So it works there as far as that's concerned. I have somewhat of a creative mind, so bringing in that remodeling and the design aspect of things, especially with regard to going into a house and looking at, a space and kind of seeing what we can do with it, is, kind of how my mind works. So again, it's a good fit for me. And then talking with customers every day, being face to face with people, gives me energy as an extrovert. So again, all of that, it fits me and it works. The kind of last piece of this is, I've built that up, and then I guess I would say I've always been kind of conscious as to what's going on in the culture and politically and religiously. You see the cross in the background. I mean, I'm Catholic. My faith is very important to me, and I have just overall not been happy with how the culture and the world has, I mean, what I would say, trashed our values as Christians and as Catholics. So I felt, I guess you could say, the call to stand up for that. That's been kind of a call on my heart for a long time. But, me as a young guy, like, I had no credibility. Like, who am I to go out there and, and talk about, the best way to live if I'm, 22, 23 years old and I haven't done anything in my life. So, again, got married when I was 24. My wife and I have 5 kids. We've been married for about 11 years now. Have built now a successful small business. So started putting my voice out there, started my YouTube channel that has gone over 111,000 subscribers over the last year. I think last year at this time I had about 1,400 subscribers. So, I'm very proud of that. It's not been easy. It's, required me to really get a video out every day while operating a small business, while also, having a family. But again, it's been very rewarding, to bring that aspect in to our business. And now it is, I am doing it, what I would say, professionally now. So I'm operating my small business, and I have a media presence that I am operating professionally, and I can say that because it is revenue generating for me, on that YouTube channel. So that's pretty much it. That's my story.
That's it. That's all you've done. It's amazing. No, I appreciate that story, and it's lots of kind of pivoting, and that's what Shift is all about. Is all the different shifts enough. And I appreciate the transparency about franchising as well. It's something I've looked into myself, and I think we're similar in a way because my parents are also entrepreneurs, and my dad grew up in having a small business and multiple small businesses. And I always knew I was going to do my own business. Like I never wanted to just be a traditional kind of 9 to 5. It was never my thing. I've definitely done those jobs, and I'm happy doing them when I need to. But it's just there's something around growing up in that environment and in that mindset that I think you just can't like. You're like it's embedded in you. So do you feel like if we can just speak on that for a couple minutes, because you've grown up with parents or with your father, for example, right? That kind of was in that mindset. Do you feel like that's what pushed you, or do you feel like you know, probably end up doing your own business anyway, regardless? Or do you feel like that environment impacted you?
The environment definitely impacted me. I mean, to watch my dad, start something from scratch and build it, and growing up, I mean, they did it. My parents did a great job. I'm one of 6 kids, and my dad's business didn't really make it, I guess you can say, until I was done with college. So growing up, like we didn't have a ton of money because my dad was, building and starting his business. My grandfather had been very successful. I mean, obviously he's older, so he had already built his successful business. But what my grandfather kind of did to my dad, and what my dad did to me, it's like they were successful starting their business, but it's not like, I mean, yes, my dad, he came in and he was basically my financial leverage to be able to take on a franchise, right? Like I had no money, I had nothing to my name, so I needed someone who had the collateral for Jimmy John's to say okay. But other than that, he became he allowed me to operate the business. I was fully responsible for it. It was mine to make successful or fail. Um, and I guess what I would say to answer your question is this: my both of my parents did a really good job at kind of inspiring within me that, and I think baseball did this too, and I had really good coaches as well. So as far as like that whole environment growing up, and we were strong in our faith. So as far as like God given purpose and vocation, that was really huge. But it was almost like, look, if you were made for something, like you were made to be a saint, and what that looks like for you is different for everybody. But there's nothing in this world that can hold you back, regardless of what it is. Like if you were made to do something. So I had within me, and you can use the word delusional, but it's not delusional. I believe it's actually the way to move forward in the work that you want to do in this life. Like if you have something calling you, you have to listen to that. And to compromise on that results in regret later in life. And to me, that's just not been something that I have, like, I don't want that life. Like you live one time, you have this opportunity. We've been given this opportunity. My parents instilled in me that, and I saw this in baseball as well. Like if I worked hard, I saw the result of hard work leading to success. That was one of the biggest and most important things that I learned through playing baseball. I knew that if I was not playing as well as I thought that I should, if I got in and did the extra work day in and day out, it would get me to where I wanted to be from an ability and from a production standpoint. And that is the case across the board with anything that you do. So I had the tools that, I guess you could say, the tools were given to me through that experience, but then I also had the mindset and the confidence and the ability to go out and pursue what I felt I was made for. Um, and I think my parents did a great job cultivating that, both my mom and dad.
Mm.
My dad by example, and my mom through encouragement.
Mm. Yeah, and I appreciate the sports piece as well. I also grew up with parents that were both very athletic and were in sports through college, and most of their careers onwards they had something to do with sports. My dad owned a gym, actually, that was one of his businesses.
Hmm.
And I see definitely, I was never like an athlete by any means, but my boyfriend was an athlete from high school onwards, and the discipline that he has, and I see this a lot in general, and just like people who've played sport, the discipline, the grit and resilience, and that hard work, and I feel like that's what's also missing in the world of work today. So you mentioned something that's very much speaks to me in my work. So my day-to-day is talent development, talent management. I do some piece of recruitment. So I'm helping people not only create fulfilling careers, but also kind of reach to their potential. And what I see
Hmm.
is missing is all those different things, like the grit, the taken or the extreme ownership piece, especially in youth today. And sure, there are people like, well, every generation was a mess before us. Like everybody always says, like, well, every generation has their thing. But I really do see there's a shift in younger generations in terms of ability to manage life in general, right? And part of it could be the missing of faith. Part of it could be the missing of the impact of the society around us. Could be all the different things that you mentioned, the politics, the religious, the all the different aspects. But I think a big part of it is just we're not, in my opinion, as a society, we're not focusing so much on building those character traits through sports and those sort of things, and it's like we become softer, I want to say, as a society. And I don't know, and I see this directly just in the work that I do in the world of work, because I deal a lot with young talent, and I'm like, how are we not able to manage this basic corporate
Hmm.
life 101, for example?
Hmm.
What are your
Yeah.
thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking at it from the macro standpoint, I mean, I tend to look at things spiritually, and yeah, I believe that there is a spiritual battle going on. I mean, and if we're looking at it like there is an enemy of our nature, there's an enemy of human souls that wants to destroy you and wants to destroy the world and is preventing you from doing the work that you are here to do. And you have to be vigilant, and you have to be awake, and you have to be aware of the enemy that's working to tempt you and distract you and to get you to think that everything should be easy and everything should be comfortable. Um, yeah, I mean, sports played such a huge role. I mean, especially baseball. I mean, I'm such a proponent and I'm a huge fan of baseball because there are so many aspects of it that translate to life, like especially dealing with failure. You fail in baseball more often than you succeed. Striking out is something that you have to deal with. You have to deal with the fear of striking out. Growing up playing, I read The Mental Game of Baseball, which highlighted all of the preparation that guys who, you take a guy like Cal Ripken Jr., for example, who played over 2,600 games in a row. And the baseball grind is well known. There's books written about it because it's 164 games and you're traveling all over the country, and it's very difficult from a grit standpoint to be able to, even play a full season every game. And that's only 164. So imagine over 2,600 games in a row when there's a 164 game season. And the baseball season is a grind. It goes from basically February all the way through November if you make the playoffs. And but what that speaks to is just a level of grit and preparation and maintenance. And just when it comes down to it, daily inputs that move you toward a desired outcome. And, when it comes down to it for me, I see an advantage for people who recognize these things and recognize, look, like, yeah, the world is soft. Everybody wants it easy. If you actually take ownership of yourself and recognize that if you do these certain things, you can separate yourself. And yeah, I think I heard Dana White say this. There's never been an easier time to produce your way and execute your way into the top 20% in this world because everybody wants it easy. Everybody wants to be comfortable. So if you're willing to endure some of the suffering and some of what it takes in order to build something successful, you have the opportunity now more than ever, especially with all the resources at our disposal, to separate yourself. So, yeah, I mean, again, my encouragement to especially young people or anybody who is thinking about getting started and and maybe doesn't know how is like, if you just figure out what it is you need to do on a daily basis and you are willing to execute that day in and day out, regardless of the external circumstances that are trying to hold you back and trying to prevent you from doing these things, you have the opportunity now more than ever to separate yourself and be successful.
Mhm. Yeah, I tend to agree. I think the flip side of this is that there's less competition, right? So like it's basically like if you just do a little bit more than the regular person, you're already going to be more successful. It's that simple, and it's kind of sad, but also it's kind of like, well, it's actually makes it easier for the rest of us who are hustlers and who do want to work hard and so on. I don't know what that means to us long term as a society, so that worries me.
Mhm.
So I think I heard something the other day, and not to throw shade on young men, but it was like 75% of young men between ages of 18 and 25, I think, are not even eligible for the military for different things in the US, like for different reasons. Sorry. So 75% of men between 18 to 25 are not eligible to join the military. I think 15% of those people is due to obesity, so unhealthy lifestyles. The rest of it is due to like random things, like whether it's criminal activity, whether it's something else. And I think that just speaks to, at least again in my world of talent development, kind of education, like it speaks to a larger challenge that we have that we're just not addressing for young people. But yeah, it's just yeah, and I mean, it's I don't know where to go with that honestly, because it's such a complex problem, and I think it's such a larger piece to it. And U.S. being a mixing bowl of so many different nationalities and religions, and it just becomes complex. I mentioned to you we just traveled to Asia with my boyfriend, and it's just different. I think U.S. is in a very unique position because it is such a mixing bowl versus in other cultures. What I see is the more focused on family life, more focused on community. You rarely see homelessness in other countries. You rarely see loneliness to that level that we have here. You rarely see that suicide rates because of drugs or alcohol or even loneliness and stuff in other countries. And I think because they are more culture, there's more, how to say, there's more family values because it's the same culture, same kind of mentality, same things, which is has its pros and cons. But I think what we can take away from the countries, again, whether it's in the Middle East or Asia, is that there's this cohesiveness in culture, and you just don't see some of the challenges that we have in America and other part of kind of developed countries around the world. And again, I see this just impacting, just I mean, I look at it from purely from like a career development, talent development space, and like where we're going to go as a society from building businesses and building companies when if we don't have young people that can actually lead those companies, or young people that can join military and protect this country, right?
Yeah, it's a purposelessness crisis that we're in, and I believe that that's the result of rooting God out of our society. If you think we're here by chance, and if you think that your life doesn't matter, and you think that you know pursuing if you think that work is just to go out there and make some money, and if you think that you don't if you think that marriage and having a family and having kids is wrong and bad, which again, like we talk about that spiritual battle, like those are all of the things that we're being attacked with nowadays, especially in the secular Western countries. And it's, of course, created a meaning and purposelessness crisis that is affecting young men for sure. Look, when it comes down to it, and this is one of the things that lights a fire within me the most is the belief that God created the world. God created each and every one of us for a purpose. And for a young man, God created you to be a leader. I understand that not every man gets married, but every man has a vocation. And I mean, in my Catholic tradition, the vocations are very simple. It's either the priesthood or religious life, or it's the vocation of being a husband and a father if you're blessed with children. But I obviously chose the husband and fatherhood route, but that path is extremely extremely meaningful and provides a tremendous amount of purpose and motivation and responsibility in my life as I've taken on that responsibility, that cross of being a leader of a family, being a husband to my wife, and being a father to my children. it has enhanced all of the other, especially business aspects of my life. Like it's um it's made my work more meaningful. It's made everything better as far as like I have other people that I provide for that are reliant on me. And it's also, it provides those motivation enhancements, and it provides those benefits, but it also strips away some of the things that you get into when you are lonely, you you have too much time on your hands, like the drugs and alcohol and the partying and all of those things. Like, look, if you were made to build something and provide and be responsible for people and produce, like, you don't have time to do those things. So it's again, it's I say it's a lack of purpose because it's a lack of attention on a purpose that inspires you and lights a fire within you. When you have that, all of the other things that prevent you from pursuing that become kind of annoying, and they're easier to give up. I talked about how I have my small business, I have my media, I have my family. Like, it's not like I don't have free time to do the things that I like to do. I enjoy sports, as I've mentioned. So we watch football and baseball together. I play, baseball and football with my boys. I coach one of my son's travel baseball teams. Like, I have my extracurricular stuff that I do, and I have a good group of friends, and we hang out. But going out and partying and staying up all night and being out late at bars and participating in that lifestyle, or using drugs and alcohol, is just something that I'm not interested at all in doing, because I have this extremely meaningful, purposeful aspect of my life that I can pursue and that can pull me. I know myself, and I know that if I don't have those things, of course I'll get myself in trouble with all of these other things that are dragging men nowadays. But again, like, I truly believe that it's a spiritual battle, and there is a enemy that is seeking the destruction of men, of families, of marriages, and it's at work, and you see it in our society. But again, like, my message is, especially to these young men, is everything that I've been saying. Like, find out what your God-given purpose is, and then pursue it all in and never compromise on it, because that is going to put you in a position where you are able to deal with the sufferings and the hardship and the adversity that life is going to throw at you inevitably.
Yeah, and it's there's a saying in Russian. I'm originally Russian, so I don't know how to translate it, but basically it just means like boredom equals like to like the evil getting in. So like if you're bored, I don't know, bored, like when you're not doing, when you're not keeping yourself busy, like that's when you start doing things that are not good for you. Because then
Yeah,
if
the
you're
saying
especially,
in America is idle hands are the devil's playground.
yeah, it's basically the same thing. Exactly. Yeah. So, in full transparency, I'll speak from a woman's perspective. Um, I moved to the U.S. when I was 13. Grew up in a very kind of traditional household with my parents. I'm one of four kids, and when I moved to the U.S., there was in Russia it's very different. It's very traditional, so it's a
Mhm.
very patriarchal society and so on. And it has its pros and cons. Now that I'm an adult, I can kind of see objectively look at both sides.
Mhm.
But we moved to the U.S., what I've seen, what I felt very heavily is this push. And this was, I mean, I'm 38 now, so do the math, like 20 plus years ago. So even then, I remember feeling this push to this independent, strong female thing. And for many, many years, in full transparency, I was really, really career focused. And my audience knows, like, I'm a workaholic, etc. I'm a recovering workaholic at this point. And so I focused so much on my career because the U.S. messaging of the society here is very much like strong, independent female and so on. That is very easy, especially having come from Russia and being very different over there. So it's very traditional. It's very limiting in some capacities. It's very exciting for somebody like me as a young woman coming here. And so I was very focused on that. And then I remember when I reached towards like my early 30s, It took me a while, obviously, but when I reached to a point where I'm like, you know what, I'm pretty financially stable, like I'm financially healthy, like I feel like I have a great career. And when I realized, I was like, oh, like that's what, like what now? Like
Hmm.
what now? Like I've reached the strong, independent female thing, and it's like, okay, it's not enough. And at
Hmm.
that point, my mindset kind of shifted. I was like, oh, like, I don't want to be like this. So, like, and I kind of went back to my traditional roots. And that's kind of the journey I've been on, is just changed my mindset a lot. And I speak a lot about that stuff because I think that it's great to be strong, and it's important to be independent, all that. But it doesn't mean you cannot be, a wife and a mom and all those other things. It doesn't exclude those other things. And I think that's what the messaging is out there, and what those social media, especially for young women, but and also young men, is that you have to be this one way. And it's like, kind of like single female. And it's like, no, like I think one has to be really careful around what is actually right for you and true for you. And like, okay, great, you are this, and to each his own. I have friends that are, listen, like, Elena, I don't want to get married, I don't want to have kids, I'm happy where I am, and that's fine, that's a choice. For me, I kind of changed my mind about that choice, and now I'm working towards kind of other things in life, and priorities changed. But I think that it's hard, Zach. Like, it's hard there's such heavy messaging that if you're not in the right environment, if you don't have that family support or that community support, it's very hard until something happens and you're like, oh, like that's not what I want to do. And not, you know what I'm saying? So, but maybe some people just prefer it that way, honestly. Like, I don't know. We can't get into somebody else's head, but
Yeah, and again, I would just go back to, again, God-given purpose and vocation. So each one of us is made differently for different things. Like, I'm not going to sit here and say that every man is made to be a husband and father, or every woman is made to be a mother necessarily, right? But my problem is more so with, like, the messaging that we receive in our culture today, that, like, especially on women, like, just the lie that being a mother is not good enough. Um, that's such a shame, right? Because there's nothing. I mean, when it comes down to it, and I know this is like a talking point that's gotten tired, but it's true. Like, there's literally nothing more important that you can do in this world than have and raise children. Like, it's an incredible privilege and blessing to be able to do that. And I think that it seems not to be unique necessarily that women start out in their careers working, doing whatever they need to do in their career and build themselves up financially, to find that in their late 20s and early 30s that, like, oh, like, okay, this isn't that great. Like, here's the thing. Like, if I was I would reach that point too as a man. Like, if I literally just built my career and that's all I had when I was 30 years old, I'd be like, okay, like, congratulations. Like, you learned how to be competent in the marketplace and make some money. It's not that difficult. It's not that hard. Like, again, there is more to life than just having a successful career, in my opinion. And for me, pursuing the work and having a family to share it with, and having things outside of my business that provide my life with a lot of meaning and purpose, is extremely rewarding. And the singular pursuit of just having a career because, you know, you watch Mad Men on Netflix, it's just like, it's just shallow, and it leads most people. I understand there are people that maybe they get fulfillment just from that. Fine, like, fine. But most people, I think, are looking for more than just that in their life.
mm. No, I tend to agree with you on that. And again, it's my personal opinion as well. But while we're on this topic, I think, and I'm curious to hear what I want to know about your podcast and kind of the kind of topics you discuss, because one of the things that I've noticed, having grown kind of in my career into senior roles as well in organizations, and having, just being a businesswoman and all those different things, what I've also recognized, which I didn't recognize before until I actually started to want to have a family and make actually like family plans, is that the work environment, the way we work in America and many Western countries, is not designed for a woman. It's not designed. It's a man's world in terms of the way it's set up. So, and I don't want to spend too much time on this because it's a little bit separate topic, but I think it's relevant to the family piece, because in a workplace, even like the number of like the duration of maternity leave is really not sufficient, for a woman. Like it's very limited. Some companies don't even offer that. Like it's very difficult to be a woman yet, let alone a mother, right? It's very discouraging to become a mother in the workplace because there's not a lot of support systems in place compared to like other countries around the world. And I didn't really know, I didn't pay attention to this until I started like thinking about starting a family. And I was like, oh, like this sucks. Like, how am I supposed to, unless you have a ton of money and have help and all those things, like how are you supposed to, and let alone before you even become a mother, the stress levels that are associated with the working environment and the corporate life, and have, especially I'm in tech, so I'm in a very male dominant industry. It's
Mhm.
not easy. It's not easy. And I think we don't think about it from that perspective. I think whoever set up the corporate culture, the corporate environment in the world did not consider a woman and all the different things that it requires to be a woman, like just in terms of like our hormones and stress levels and all the things that we go through just on a given month.
Sure, but you're talking to someone who is basically black pilled on corporate culture. like, that's it's not for me. I would argue that yeah, of course, women suffer in those environments, but so do men. Like most of the corporate environment just eats away at people's souls.
Mm.
Like this is what. So what I am pro small business, pro entrepreneur, but like more so like solopreneurship. Like that is what has become most attractive to me. And what I admire, I mean, is like you talked about being all about the hustle and the grind, and you did all that to build yourself up. And I certainly started out that way until I realized like, oh my gosh, like this is unsustainable. From a mental and physical and spiritual emotional health. Like I can't keep this up. I can't continue to work this much over the course of the week and be able to live the life that I want to live. Like again, this is unsustainable. This is going to cause me to die earlier. I mean, if anything, right? But like what has become most attractive to me is making the most amount of money for the least amount of time put in, right? So that's where, I mean, you follow like a guy like Justin Welsh. I don't know if you guys know who that is, but look him up on LinkedIn and Twitter. Like this is a guy who advocates for solopreneurship, which is basically a very small form of business that provides you with a fairly short work day or work week period, but maximizes revenue so that you do have time to do things that humans like to enjoy instead of just working all the time, right? So, and I think that applies to both men and women. I'm an advocate for men starting that business that's on their hearts or pursuing whatever it is that they feel called to do and learning how to do that and learning how to build a financial vehicle that allows them to have meaningful work, have meaningful relationships, have a meaningful life, etc. Women the same. You like imagine a woman who is creative or wants to pursue and build something, which many women do. I have two sisters, I have two daughters. Like I want that for them as well. And there are many creative women out there that do great work in all areas of endeavor. But a woman pursuing that role where maybe it provides for the flexibility to be able to work from wherever she wants and work from home and work at hours that are not required or demanded by somebody else, that does give her the flexibility in her life to also be a mother and in a more traditional setting like I have, for example, like run a household and be home with the kids and kind of work wherever she wants, or if she needs to, if she wants to have another baby, it provides her again with that flexible schedule to make that something that it's almost like a both and. It doesn't have to be either or. But
Mm.
that's why I advocate so hard for like the solopreneur, entrepreneur, small business model. Now, are there periods of life where, in that realm where you have to work hard to get something started and get something going? Sure. But the goal of working towards something that, maximizes your ROI on time is something that I've just become significantly more interested in and have pursued myself, as opposed to the corporate world where you're beholden to somebody else and somebody else controls and demands your time. And, as I said, you work away and it eats at your soul.
Yeah, I'm starting to come to that conclusion as well over the last few years. But I think it just takes time to get to that point. I think you have to go through the process of that part of your life to realize that. I think it's very difficult. Like I always think, like if I would have known this at 25, but you don't, and it's impossible. I feel sometimes to know that you have to go through it, like to get to that conclusion. You know what I mean? So there's
You
no
don't. And me and
shortcuts.
you can sit here and talk about it. I'm 35, you're 38, and we can sit here and talk about it, but the 25, 22-year-old is still isn't going to listen to us.
Yeah, exactly.
You know
I
what I mean?
wouldn't
Like
have. I
they've
wouldn't
got to
have.
go through it themselves. And I had
Yeah.
to, you had to. It's just a part of
Yeah.
life.
Yeah. No, it's just it is what it is. Let's pivot to your podcast. So, who is it for? Who should listen to it? What's your aim with your podcast, and what's the name of it?
Yeah, so I mean, I have a YouTube channel. I mean, the core of it is called basically the Zach Costello Show, which is where I get into, cultural and political topics. What I say from a God first perspective. Ultimately, again, like I got kind of sick and tired of, my values, family values, marriage, um, God believing, I would say Christian values being trashed in our culture. I believe that the pursuit of them does lead to all the things that we've been talking about: God given purpose, meaning in your life, fulfillment. I think it's the remedy for what a lot of people are experiencing with regard to suffering and loneliness and hardship in their life. So I decided that I was, gonna, speak from my experience and speak from my perspective and who I am to stand up for those values. So that's kind of what I'm doing on my channel. I mean, I guess when it comes down to it, like with regard to, I mean, I'm an American. I talk about politics. I believe that the fight to keep America as one nation under God, for all of the reasons that I've been talking about this entire time, is extremely important. We're blessed to live in a country where we have the freedom to pursue our God-given vocation, and that has not been the case necessarily in countries throughout history. There are countless examples of dictatorships and authoritarians and communist regimes, for example, that have prevented people from being able to carry out the work that God made them to do. So I consider it a very again, we live in a time in America where you have that right, with all the resources that so many people have sacrificed themselves for, to be able to allow us to be in a position that we're in today, in a free country with countless resources that allow us to pursue these things like entrepreneurship and small business and solopreneurship and just work in general. I mean, what a blessing. Wow. So yeah, I mean, I think fighting for that is certainly important. That's the reason that I started my podcast, um, and that's what I'm fighting for.
And congratulations on the success of the podcast. By the way, 110,000 followers it's hard to do, and so kudos to you for that. So that's your YouTube channel. I'll make sure to include it on the show notes. Before I ask you my last questions, is there anywhere else you hang out? I know you and I connected on LinkedIn. Is there any way, the best way for people to follow you, connect with you?
Yeah, so I mean, everything that I kind of do starts on YouTube. That's where my longest form content is created there, and then I'll take the shorter forms of of that content and I'll put it on Instagram and TikTok. I don't recommend people necessarily just using TikTok to browse. I put my stuff on there to hopefully, provide some light in what I consider a dark space. But yeah, I mean that's where I'll post. I have recently started posting more on X, Twitter, and also LinkedIn. I'm not super active on those platforms. I mean, for sure, I think if you want to follow most of my stuff, that's going to be on my YouTube channel, and then perhaps Instagram as a number two.
Sounds good. And the last question I ask all my guests: what is one question you wish people would ask themselves more often?
Am I on the path to becoming the person that God made me to be? I think asking that on a daily basis is critical.
Beautiful. Zach, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks for having me, Elena.